Welcome to Jazz Zone Together, our new online jazz community, where we'll provide jazz education resources, interviews with jazz educators, artists, and celebrities, along with valuable tips and repertoire suggestions. Today, we're joined by well-known jazz artist, performer, conductor, and editor, Pete BarenBregge. I'll now turn the mic over to Dick Dunscomb to begin the interview process.
Thank you, Bob. As you mentioned, we are honored to have Pete join us today. We were blessed to have Pete serve as our editor on the new jazz curriculum, Jazz Zone. Without Pete's contribution to this project, it would probably never have seen the light of day. Of course, his work on our new book is only a small piece of Pete's remarkable career. Pete, give us an idea of the rundown of your career to date.
All right, I'm glad to be here to discuss this project with all of you. I'm sort of proud that in my lifetime of work, I have had to do a variety of things to make a living in the music business, and I've kind of covered a few different bases. In a nutshell, teaching, actually 4 bases: teaching, management, and business, and as a musician as well as a performing musician. For example, when I got out of college, I had a music ed degree, so I became a band director in Wilmington, Delaware, and I did that for about almost 9 years. And all the while I was teaching, I was playing lots of gigs as a musician, learning what I needed to learn, and I enjoyed teaching. Everything was good. I had usual middle school bands and high school bands and jazz ensembles and concert bands and all that sort of stuff. So it was terrific. But I always kind of wanted to be a full-time musician if I possibly could and make a living with the family. So just by chance, an opening came up in the United States Air Force Band in Washington, D.C. with the Airmen of Note, their premier jazz ensemble. So I'm thinking, whoa, let me check this out. So I went and I contacted them, called them, and I went down to audition to Washington, and they offered me the job. And at first I was a little reluctant because I was kind of thinking, well, do I want to join the Air Force, And so I had a few weeks to make my decision. And so Delaware is only like 2 hours from DC. So I would go back and forth a couple of times to hear them rehearse and watch them do a couple performances. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I can never dream of playing in a band like this. So I'm in. So I became a member of the United States Air Force, and my job was with the Airmen of Note. So that was a 20-year career. And during that 20 years, about halfway through, the guy who had hired me, Dave Steinmeier, retired. So I became the director of the group. So I ended up being the band leader for about 9 years until I retired. So far then, I've been a band director, teacher, and a player on the side. And now I'm in the Air Force, and that's a structure for sure. And then when I became the director, I have managerial responsibilities that I never dreamed I would be doing, not only of the controlling the members and leading the members of the band, but paperwork and answering to the higher ups and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a pretty challenging management job that never stopped. And then when I retired from the Air Force, I was going to go back to teaching again. And I was doing a recording session, just completely separate from anything, in the Washington, D.C. area for a publisher. And the guy who was running the studio said, hey, there's an opening for a jazz editor with Warner Brothers. And I said, well, what's a jazz editor? I didn't know anything about that. So he gave me the number of a guy named Bob Dingley, who you already met. And I called him, and we talked. And I think by chance, Bob had to come up to the Washington. I was living in the D.C. area at that time. And Bob had to come up to D.C. for a meeting or whatever. And so we met for lunch, and we got along pretty well. And he liked what I had to say, and I liked what he had to say. And then he invited me down to Miami, where the company is, to meet the CEO and for a second interview. Anyhow, I accepted that job, and I'm very happy I did. It was a great thing to do, and I was able to work from my home in Maryland, which was ideal for my situation with the family. And I truly say Bob was a mentor. I'm not just saying that, but I learned everything I know how to do about editing through Bob, and he really was a key factor in my skill and knowledge and appreciation of what has to be done to make music sellable. So that's a good thing. So I look at that, and I still work part-time for Alfred Music. Alfred ended up acquiring Warner Brothers Publications, so I ended up doing the same job as jazz editor for Alfred Music, and I still work part-time for them. So I think of my career so far: teaching, playing, management, more playing, editing, more playing music. So I think I've covered a lot of bases, and gives me, I think, in my opinion, a pretty good perspective on the music business. And once again, I've been very fortunate to have these things. So how's that for an answer?
That's some special kind of a lifetime, Pete. Certainly those years you spent with the Airmen of Note helped to keep the legacy of that ensemble at the forefront of the jazz world, and was very important to jazz educators. Share with us some of the highlights that stand out in your mind.
I'm not sure you have enough time, Dick, for me to answer all the highlights, because there are unlimited highlights. First of all, that job, you're in the Air Force. You know, it's not, I mean, some people think, you know, because you're in the band and you're playing in a jazz group, that it's that you're just like a civilian. No, you're in the Air Force, basic training, the whole thing. It's an official job in every single capacity, with all the responsibilities and pride that you could expect. And as far as the mission of that band, and all the service bands for that matter, it's number one is to provide support for the troops, for the members of your service. And we did that constantly. We were musical, the Airmen of Note, in addition to that, was certainly musical ambassadors. And let me give you a brief story. I can recall one time, this is probably during the 90s sometimes, there were some conflicts, shall we say, with a different country. And some of the dignitaries from that country were coming to the Pentagon to talk about some very important things. And while they were in Washington, these dignitaries from another country, which we were not especially close to, somebody decided that it'd be good to have them be entertained, and they thought of the Airmen of Note. So these dignitaries came to the Air Force Base, Belling Air Force Base, and we put on a little history of jazz show that encompassed from African music to contemporary jazz. It was, you know, everything in about 40 minutes. So it was bang, 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 show, you know, fast paced to say the least. And the reason I mentioned this story is these people were so enamored with what we had to do with American jazz at this particular level, and our demeanor and the way we handle things, you know. So we did our show, and that's it. And then a couple of days later, I got the word from our commander that the discussions that they had between our country and this country were great, and everything was looking good, and everybody was happy. And I just think, once again, as ambassadors, we scored big time. So that's one little side thing about that. Another responsibility of the band is public relations for the Air Force, meaning that we would do these community relations tours all through the United States. And I've been to everywhere twice in the United States. And that was basically marketing, if you will, for the United States Air Force. In fact, these concerts were free. It was a jazz concert. And the goal was, and to my mind, everybody who leaves that concert is going to love the Air Force through music. And so that was my goal. And I think we we did pretty darn well. I got tremendous feedback over my career with that. So that's an important thing, because those people don't go to an Air Force base. They don't see people flying jets. They don't see people doing all the day-to-day work. They don't see people handling cargo and everything else, the other tasks and responsibilities of people in the military. They see guys and women in a band playing jazz, and we look good, we play good, we're acting as professional as possible and as patriotic. So we get the job done. And lastly, I just say we had a chance to tour the world and share this among other countries as well. Some other highlights during the course of my time, I had a chance to play with unbelievable musicians every day. It was like, you know, and it wasn't like any civilian band where you're going to have subs all the time. No, it's the same people playing the same way. And we all knew it was a homogeneous group. We knew how to breathe together, how to play together, how to play in tune together, all those nuances that you don't get in a civilian type band with people coming and going. But we had guests all the time. Let me just rattle off a few names: Dizzy Gillespie, J.J. Johnson, Frank Sinatra Jr., Henry Mancini, Randy Brecker, Ernie Watts, Louis Bellson, Bob Mintzer, Joe Williams, Peter Erskine, Arturo. I could go on for 20 minutes with all the people we had a chance to perform with. So it was fantastic. And I learned so much from those people. We did great recordings with the band, which are legendary. They're free, but good luck getting them. They're kind of hard to come by, but they're fantastic. We did a lot of recruitment, ultimately. I think we added notoriety for the United States Air Force Band. You know, we have such a following and such a reputation that's unparalleled. I had a chance to play for at least 4 presidents and kings and queens throughout the world, so I had great opportunities there. The band was originally formed in 1950, the Airmen of Note, to carry on the music of Glenn Miller, which we did, and that was a very important part of our heritage. So those are some things we did in the Airmen of Note.
Fantastic, Pete. Just fantastic. Your role as editor of Jazz Zone provided you with a close-up and detailed view of its creation. Give us your perspective of Jazz Zone and its value to jazz educators.
All right. First of all, you as the author, I've worked with you a couple of times on some other projects, and I have great respect for what you know and the way you explain things and the way you deliver information to people. So when you asked me about this, I was very excited about working with you again, because I know you know what you're doing. And you have integrity too, and that's something I really respect. The real essence of this Jazz Zone to me is the fact that it provides practical information. It's nothing that it's everything you need to know, basically. I mean, are there more nuances? Sure, but you know, you only have so much time and so much paper in a book, but I think you cover so many bases, and the real focus is on swing. And, you know, after teaching and working clinics and doing everything all over the country and elsewhere in the world, that's a very hard concept to get across to young people, especially, and people who even are musicians but are classically trained. You know, they don't really get it about how to swing. You know, they get a little bit, but they don't get the whole picture. But you cover that in great detail, and that's pretty much the underlying focus, in my opinion, of this book, is how to swing playing jazz. The things in the lesson plans are very important, and I think you've covered once again all the essential things. I think one of the key elements is that you demand and you insist on people listening, and that, to me, that's the best teacher of all. You can talk for 2 hours about something, but if you put on a track and the people are listening to the track and you listen to it again, it's like, oh, well, I see how that goes. Bang, they got it. So listening is essential, and you make that a big part of this whole project, and imitation as well. You know, you listen to how this is played, and then you do it. You try and imitate it. Maybe you won't get it perfectly, but you got the idea in your head from listening to it. You cover the national standards. You have such great objectives. You have reviews. You have warm-ups. You have assessment, vocabulary, words. You have different models, and then you have a closure at the end of each unit. I think the topics, I look at the topics here, I'm looking at the table of contents essentially, and you cover various bands, you cover all the instruments, including the rhythm section, which is oftentimes overlooked, and you cover that in great detail. You brought in other people to talk about those instruments and how to teach those instruments and how it applies to jazz, and I think you did a good thing there, because not only did you have other viewpoints, but you had top professionals who know what they're doing, that are specialists on those instruments, and they know more than you do or I do about those things, you know, so they can talk about it very specifically, and that's great. I like the fact that there's different colored highlighted text in the digital version. I guess in the print version that wasn't doable, but in the digital version that is very important, so the teacher can see what a certain color is for instruction, certain color is for reading things to the students, and then there's tips and such and suggestions, all color coded. So that's it's a great plus. There's 4 arrangements in this thing, so you get 4 charts. You can't beat that. And the scores are in the conductor's book. It's very complete. There's pictures of people playing instruments. You discuss articulation, which is absolutely positively essential, key element in playing jazz. You talk about phrasing. You talk about, in very basic ways, some improv. You talk about different tempos. You know, you got it all. So that's why I wanted to be a part of this, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
And you were a big part of it, Pete. I can't begin to tell you how honored I was to have you be a part of it.
No, thanks.
We know that today you continue to be active as a performer, even in these days of COVID. Share with us some of what's keeping you busy these days.
Well, I am not doing a lot of outside gigs because nobody is. So that's come to a screeching halt. I do practice a lot still. And I still, I said, mentioned work part-time for Alfred. So I'm still editing for that company. And I enjoy that very much. I also do a lot of online teaching. I do some stuff for the University of Arkansas, teaching their master's program. So I have a saxophone studio there with not so much saxophone lessons, but jazz improv and jazz pedagogy. And then I watch TV like everybody else.
Absolutely. Well, these days are indeed different. Let's talk about music. It would be interesting for me and our listeners to know your favorite jazz tune, and possibly, could you play a little bit of it for us?
Sure. Well, to name my favorite jazz tune, once again, that's difficult to do. The tune I think I'd like to play a little bit for you is one called Alone Together, which somehow rings true. So what I thought I'd do is I'll just play by myself without any accompaniment. Mostly, I have the wherewithal to do accompaniment, but I can't control that as much. So I'll just play a little bit of the tune. I'll play a little improv, and then I'll finish it out for you, okay?
Right.
But you can imagine the accompaniment, all right? Hope my reed's still wet. Okay.
That's Pete BarenBregge and his exquisite rendition on tenor saxophone. Pete, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate your amazing contributions to Jazz Zone and look forward to working and speaking with you again in the future.
Sounds great. My pleasure. Best of luck with the book and with the music business. Thanks.
To be sure you receive information about additional broadcasts and the broadcast schedule for Jazz Zone Together, visit our website, printmusicsource.com, and go to the Jazz Zone Together page to register, and you'll receive regular updates on activities. Thank you both for being here today, and we look forward to working further together down the road. Keep making music.